Abraham, how are you?
I'm doing great, sir. It's
Dude,
good
thank
to
you.
good to see you
No, for
virtually,
sure.
of course.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. It's this is similar to the podcast I did with Chris Lee, the
Uh-huh.
lawyer. This
Yes.
one it's weird because like when I met Chris is like when I met you too, and you guys were
Right.
like little middle school, early high schoolers, but now you're married, you're a pastor.
Yes.
It's pretty different now.
Yes. Things have changed a lot in the last like what 13 to 15 years. It's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I need to ask you, how was getting married during the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah. Uh it was it was obviously disappointing. Um but yeah, I mean, so long story short, we're supposed to get married in June of this year. And then uh, we had decided, hey, obviously it's a pandemic. It's probably not going to be a good idea for June. During this time, we didn't, I guess, expect COVID to be what it is. This
Yeah.
was early on, and so we were like, okay, well, let's push it back to the fall of this year, and maybe this will kind of just get better. I guess it was just being very hopeful and optimistic. So our second wedding date was supposed to actually be this past weekend. It was supposed to be Halloween weekend.
Oh,
And yeah, and so but long story short, like the more and more we kind of researched and we just knew that, COVID wasn't gonna go anywhere, right? And so there was for us, there was no point of waiting till October to get married because we just knew that it wasn't gonna happen. And so for the third time, we pushed it back to this to summer of next year, like our actual kind of actual wedding.
yeah.
But end of July, July 31st specifically, we decided to do a mini moni, which is a new term that just started this year because of COVID. I'm sure you've seen a lot of our people that we know mutually do mini monies as well,
Yeah.
where it's like super small, super private, intimate, and then a lot of our friends are still going to do their ceremonies like next year.
Mm.
And so that's our plan as well. Hopefully, this is the third time, so hopefully third time's a charm. And we decided that if it doesn't work out this third time, then it's just one of those things where we'll just have to kind of let go. And we're already married anyway, legally and in the spiritual sense as well, right? So
Yeah.
obviously, if summer of 2021 doesn't work out, it'll be disappointing again. But I think because we've been through the waves of emotions this year, I think it's something that Jess and I can handle. And at this point, it's really for our family and friends, right? Because
Yeah.
for the mini moni, it was so small that it was really intimate between her and I, and we really actually enjoyed that because it's something that we didn't plan to do, but it just kind of worked out that way, and we're kind of grateful and trying to have great perspective along the way. So, but yeah, keeping our hopes up for summer of next year. But if not, it's all good. We're married and we've already begun the marriage journey. So that's what's most important. So that's where
Yeah.
we're at in terms of yeah our COVID experience of getting married in this crazy year.
Yeah. That's man. So it's very similar to a lot of other people, their
Hmm.
stories of kind of just getting legally married and
Right.
pushing off the big like celebration ceremony till next year. But can you imagine if this is still happening next summer? I don't know, man. That's
Yeah.
just the thought of that like
Yeah.
makes me go crazy.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like that was actually why we pushed it back to the summer because a lot of friends that we know like pushed it back to like early next year, like between February, April,
Yeah.
and we thought about that too, doing like a spring wedding. But like I said, because we've been through the emotional roller coaster and kind of been through the disappointments twice now, we
Mm.
were like, let's try to push it back as far as possible, but not like super far. We're so like not end of next year, but like mid next year. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. If COVID is still as bad as it is now, it's just one of those things where I don't know. I mean, there's at that point there's going to be bigger things that we need to be talking about than just my wedding, right? We're
Right.
talking about the state of our country and our world, which is obviously in the grand scheme more important than one person's
Mm.
wedding. So yeah, that would be unfortunate if summer of 2021 it's just as bad, if not worse. That'd be very disappointing. So
Yeah. Well, hopefully,
yeah,
we get treatments and vaccines before that, so that we can finally kind of go back to the norm.
right, for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, Abe, today I was hoping to get kind of your life story. And I
Hmm.
feel like I know a lot of it just because I've known you for a while and I've
Right.
witnessed parts of it, right? But the parts
Hmm.
that I actually am not super clear on, or not clear, but I just I haven't really been intimately close to you, is like your process of, graduating college and becoming a pastor. That whole
Yeah.
thing. I kind of heard from your brother, because your brother is Pastor Namu, Pastor
Yes.
John. He's
Yes.
been on the podcast several
He's
times.
your pastor.
Right, right, right.
For
So,
sure. Yeah.
like I always hear news about you through him because like we hang out a lot. But
Right.
like, yeah, I wanted to hear from you, kind of, because you were always, very involved in church and things like that. But you were always
Hmm.
such a goofy guy. You love like hype and
Yeah.
you're very high energy. So,
And I still am, by the way. I still am, by the way. Listen, something's never changed, David. Something's never changed.
yeah. So I just want to hear kind of the process, and I'm not saying that people like that can't become pastors, but
Sure, sure.
when people think about pastor, it's like someone very reserved and very kind of like your
Right.
brother. Like I feel like your brother is
Yeah.
the stereotypical
Yeah.
pastor. So
Yeah.
because you don't really fit the mold exactly in that way. I'm just interested to
Right.
know kind of your journey. So let's take it all the
Yeah.
way from the beginning. Let's like where were you born? Like how was it growing up? Let's get into all that.
Oh, my childhood? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was born in New Jersey. I was born in Wayne, New Jersey, and raised in Clifton. And then our close cousins, Joyce and Daniel, they lived in Paramus. And so we were really close to them because our moms are sisters. And so basically raised there. Um, can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So yeah, born in New Jersey and born there in 1991. I'm giving up my age now, which is fine. And then
I think I lost you on audio.
About me.
Oh, there we go. We got it. We got it back.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry.
Mhm.
still hear me? Sorry about that.
No, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, honestly, most of my childhood, all I remember from New Jersey is just a lot of snow. Uh, me being kind of what you said earlier, kind of being the goofy, kind of crazy kid. Like that's exactly how it was from the from the minute I was born until we left New Jersey in 1998. And so I honestly don't have a lot of memories that I can like vividly remember from New Jersey. The only two things is like definitely playing in the snow like every winter because the Northeast is insane in the
Yeah.
winter. And then the second thing is being at church like all the time. So it's interesting. I don't know if my brother would agree with this, but my brother and I, even though we were never pastors' kids, it always felt like we were. At least from my perspective, it felt like we were
Mhm.
because I feel like we were at church more than pastors' kids, which is like ironic, right?
Yeah.
From what I remember, my mom was like the secretary of our church, and we actually went to a pretty large church. I think if I remember correctly, it was like 3-4 thousand person church, so it was very
Wow.
large. Bethany Methodist Church in New Jersey, and then our father was one of the worship leaders of the church, so he was basically on staff, right? And
Mm.
so that's what I mean by like it felt like we were pastors' kids, even though on paper we weren't. And so
Right.
yeah, snow outside, playing outside with my friends and stuff like that, church friends, and then literally being at church like more than we were at home was kind of my two biggest takeaways from New Jersey.
Mm.
And then we moved to Georgia when I was about 7 or 8, and so most of my life has been in Georgia now. What 20 to 21 years of my life has been Georgia, which is why even though I wasn't born in Georgia, like this is where I grew up. This is where I, became the person that I am because,
Mm.
Jersey is such a important part of my life, but it didn't really like shape me into who I am, right? So
Mm.
it's funny though, when I meet new people, they always just expect me to be born in Georgia because I'm a huge like Atlanta fan, and I always like represent Atlanta as much as I
Yeah.
can in the state of Georgia. And so when people find out that that was born in New Jersey, they're always shocked, and they always ask like, how come you don't rep New Jersey, or like how come you're not like a Yankees fan or Knicks fan or whatever, all the sports teams. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I was like 5 or 6, like I don't really have anything to hold on to. So
You know,
yeah, that's kind of like the reason why Georgia's so big to me.
that's an interesting point because I don't really know where the line is drawn for like what teams you're allowed to root for, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm from LA. So like I was born in Korea, but I lived like from kindergarten until sixth grade. I lived in LA, and so
Mhm.
for baseball, when the Braves were playing
The
Dodgers
Dodgers.
to
Yeah.
see who would go to the World Series. Like for me,
Mhm.
I felt like, well, I'll root for whoever wins because like I feel like like back in the day when remember Park Chano, Chano Park. He was a
Yeah. I
I
remember.
think wasn't he the first South Korean pitcher in the MLB?
I'm not sure if he was the first. I just know he's like definitely the most well known, like the most
Right.
famous for
Right.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
because when I lived there, that was when he was pitching still, and so like we would go and
Hmm.
watch his games. And so like when I tell people like, oh, I don't really care who wins this game, they're like, why would you not care? Like, and
Right.
recently
Right.
I took a picture of my daughter Aisley in a LA Dodgers cap, and I
I saw
posted
that. I
it.
saw that story. I
And
saw
people were
that.
like, take that hat off your head right now. Like people were like getting upset. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
but so you're kind of on the side of it's where you grew up and like where you identify as your hometown. Is that kind of how you
Right. Right. Yeah.
gotcha,
And
gotcha.
also because, as a 5, 6 year old kid, I wasn't watching sports. Like I know, my brother, like he's a
Yeah.
huge sports fan, right? But he's interesting because, he's obviously 6 years older than me. So our experience in New York and New Jersey is more formative for him, which is probably why I assume he still, loves all the New York teams, and
Yeah.
he supports Atlanta sports too, but every time you ask him if New York is playing Atlanta, he's gonna always kind of sway towards New York a little bit more, which
Mm.
makes sense because he was probably 14, 15 when we moved down here, so he just had more time to kind of have that passion, I guess. Whereas
Yeah.
for me, I was just running around being a crazy kid that I was. So that's what I was doing.
So how was the move for you? So you said you were 7 when you moved from New Jersey to
Yeah,
Georgia?
yeah,
Because
I was about 7 or 8. Yeah,
that's a big difference in terms of,
right.
like especially back then,
Mm,
most of Georgia, like the area that we live in, was like just trees and not really much,
right.
nowhere to really go. It was, very
Yeah.
just so like how was that transition for you?
So honestly, from what I remember, you'll probably realize at the end of this podcast that I have really bad memories. So whatever I say may not always be the most accurate thing. Like I might have to fact check this with my brother later because his memory is superb, whereas mine is
Mhm.
pretty shaky. But I think from like a physical space, because we were in the suburbs of New Jersey, like I wasn't like born in New York, the city, Like we always went to the city and stuff, and like my aunts and like like parents and stuff had businesses there and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was like your typical kind of suburban life. And so going from that suburb to kind of the southern suburb, I think that part I don't think was a huge uh transition for me. I
Mhm.
think the biggest transition was and I'm sure you've heard the story about our family, but a little bit after we came to New Jersey was when we went through a lot of painful times as a family where my biological father kind of just disappeared, and my mom was left with my brother and I as a single mom kind of raising us on her own.
Yeah.
And I think that part was probably the most difficult because we made a big decision to move from New Jersey to Georgia, and then now our family's pretty much broken up, and we're in a new place where we don't have friends, we don't know anybody. My mom probably didn't have a lot of friends, so I think that transition, like internally as a family, was what made it probably difficult. But once again, you know, when you're 7, 8, you know, obviously you're kind of naive. You just kind of, you know, still play with your friends and kind of do what you do. And so I think that was probably maybe a defense mechanism for myself as a young child, where my brother and my mom probably had to, you know, kind of take most of the blow, like most of the impact, right? Because I'm sure that they were, you know, trying to protect me because I was so young, and they didn't want me to, like, I guess, have a dysfunctional childhood, like try to keep things as normal as possible. And so I
Right.
know that they both sacrificed a lot for probably my sake, I would assume. And so for me, I think I was fortunate and lucky in that way that my brother and my mom did that for me so that I could, you know, have some sort of normalcy as much as possible.
Yeah.
But, you know, as I got older and I realized what had happened, I think when I got into my middle school, high school years was when I really, like, felt the pain, even though it happened like years before, because I didn't have to deal with it at that time. But as I got older, I had to face kind of the reality of what had happened to our family. And I think that's when I probably was being a jerk and, you know, not the nicest guy to be around, because I think I was dealing with a lot of emotions internally. So, but yeah, to answer your question, from Jersey to Georgia, I don't think it was the physical space. I think it was the internal family stuff that made it really hard for all of us.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
so interesting because when things, you know how people say when things happen to you at a young age, like you can't really process it right
Hmm.
then and there. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to hear from someone that I know, you know, that there
Right.
was kind of a delayed reaction to that.
Yeah. 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 Definitely super delayed, you know, because
Mm.
it was probably like 5 to 7 years after that I really started to, like, I guess, feel the, you know, emotions of anger and like abandonment,
Yeah,
kind of all the things that you know, come with it. So that was obviously a difficult time, but you know, we got through it as a family. So
yeah. Have you had contact with your biological father at all?
no,
Wow.
so yeah, since that day, as far as I know, none of us have had contact. I personally haven't. I mean, I would assume my brother and my mom haven't either, or I'm sure they would have told me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just was kind of not a clean cut, but a cut nonetheless. And we've obviously moved on from that point on and kind of started a new life. And you know, we have an amazing stepfather who's in our life,
Yeah.
who's been our father now almost 20 years, which is crazy.
Wow.
I believe my parents got married 2001, so next year would be 20 years
Mm.
having stepfather as our father. And so yeah, that's just
Yeah.
kind of our new blended family. So
Yeah. I mean, I know your parents and yeah, like
right.
you're both so nice, such sweet people. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes,
So
they are.
I want to ask, was the fact that your stepfather ended up being this really just like, from what I can tell, like nurturing and caring person, was that
Yeah.
like restorative for you from like some of the hurt that was caused by your like biological father's departure?
Um, I don't know if I would use restorative because not to say anything bad about my stepfather, but I, I think in my opinion, from my experience, other people I'm sure will disagree, but I think it's an impossible task for another man to try to come and replace, you know, like, I guess, your biological father,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
matter how amazing he is, which my stepfather is amazing. Like you said, you know, you've gotten to know him over the years, and he's the sweetest guy, and you know, he obviously loves Jesus and loves his family, and really, you know, kind of, you know, lives out the gospel, which is amazing. But I think for me, I never wanted or expected him to, I guess, restore or you know, take the place of my biological father, because I just think that's not fair.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think or I vividly remember, like, um the first few months that my mom was dating him, like before they got married, I remember vividly, like, just hating him so much. And it was nothing that he did, it was nothing that he said. Like, he wasn't a bad guy, he's still the same guy he was then and now, which is a
Mm.
sweet man. But for me as a young boy, because I was still going through the emotions, now having to deal with, okay, like my father left me, but now I'm dealing with essentially gaining a new father. Like it was a lot for like a young boy to kind of handle the emotions of that, right? Because it kind of
Yeah.
happened. I mean, it didn't happen quickly. It happened a few years after. My mom was single for a little while, but like in the grand scheme, like it happened quicker than I'm sure people expected. And so, yeah, it wasn't fair to my stepdad, but like I just hated him in the beginning. I
Mm.
always gave him a hard time, like on purpose. I was just a brat. Um, and in respect to him, he took it. He didn't like lash back or like, why are you like doing this? Like I think he understood why I was the way I was. I think he could tell that, I was just a young boy who was hurting, and it was hard to accept the fact that there was a new kind of male older or a male father figure in my life that I had to kind of deal with. And so, but over the years, I think, as I matured and as I kind of came to grips with the reality of our family, um, it, things got a lot smoother and better.
Yeah.
But but I could never expect a man to, I guess, kind of be in the restorative role to answer your question.
Right.
Not because of the man's character, but just because I think that's a really difficult ask of anybody to, come into to that kind of situation and expect to do that. And so that's just kind of where I'm at with my relationship with my stepfather and kind of the whole history of it.
Yeah. Wow. You know, the thing I really enjoy about doing this podcast is I've known you like years, like decades now, right? But
Yeah,
like
yeah, long time.
I've never actually asked you that conversation. Like I never asked you
Yeah,
that question. We never had
yeah,
the conversation about. But wow, thanks for that. Thanks for the
yeah,
honesty,
of
vulnerability
course,
there. Yeah,
of
because
course.
one of the things that I talked to your brother about, I think one time is like whenever your father does something like that's not good, you get this fear that is that part of whatever part of him that caused him to do that thing, like is that in me?
Hmm.
So like
Hmm.
have you struggled with that? Like I mean, of course you're you would never like leave your family or anything like that, but have you
Hmm.
ever had to like grapple with the fear that is there something inside me that might cause me to do something like this in the future or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Um, Now I don't want to speak for my brother or my mom, but
Mm.
for me, growing up, I always knew that I was like my biological father's like mini me. Like even though obviously me and my brother, like we have the same parents, all that thing, like I think personality wise, I would argue that my brother and my mom are extremely similar in just the way they think, the way they kind of deal with emotions and deal with things. And then I think me and my biological father, as far as I remember, and from the things that my mom has told me about kind of his personality and stuff, I think positive and negative both. I think we have a lot of similarities. And so for me, growing up as a young boy, dealing with the emotions, the pain of being abandoned by my father, but then finding out as I get older, kind of the same mannerisms, the same kind of goofiness, kind
Mm.
of the loud, center of attention kind of personality. Like that's who I am, right? And that's exactly what my dad was too. And so yeah, it's been a very difficult journey for me because I appreciate the positive qualities that he's, I guess, handed down to me, whether it's genetically or just through, me observing him as a kid.
Mhm.
But then equally, it instilled a lot of fear and insecurity in me because I felt like I was a carbon copy of him. And then that, kind of spiraled into like, man, what if I, make the same mistake when I get married or when I have kids, or, wife. And obviously I'm married now, but this was, thoughts that I had like in high school and college, like,
Yeah.
what's my future gonna be like? Am I gonna essentially give up when things get hard, kind of like he did? Am I gonna kind of continue that what I define as generational, cycles, generational curses?
Right.
And so yeah, that part has been probably one of the most difficult hurdles that I've faced in my entire life.
Mm.
And now that I am married, it's even more in the back of my mind. I don't like think about it actively all the time, but I know that it's that kind of fear and that kind of insecurity is still lingers in the back of my mind. But yeah, but I think my relationship with Jess is amazing, and we've obviously grown together and separately or individually over the years. And I've had those conversations with her, and I've had some therapy and stuff like that to just kind of get over that hump and get over that fear that I'm not going to continue these negative trends and cause kind of that pain upon my family. And so yeah, I mean, right now, we've only been married for a few months, and God willing, in the future we'll have kids. And I think even then, I'm sure it'll be another challenge of now that we have kids in our lives, it's like the stakes kind of get higher, right? And so I'm sure you can attest to that, being kind of a newer father as well. And so yeah.
Oh wow. So like, I think that's great that you had those conversations with Jess because yeah, I think it's easy to hide those things away and just try to deal with it yourself, but that tends to like fester if you do that. So it's great that you had those conversations. And you said you like spoke to a therapist about that. So
Yeah,
would
I've
you
had
say
to.
that
Yeah, I mean,
would you say that that was helpful?
yeah, I think for me, yeah, therapy, like I haven't done like a lot of it. I think that's it's more of a recent thing, like in the last year or two. Um, but I think for me, what I realized was the most helpful is that I became more self-aware to understand that I'm a very strong external processor. So I'll have like thoughts in my head, but then when it comes out, it doesn't really make sense until I say it, and then I kind of slowly put the pieces together, and then I kind of understand what I'm trying to communicate. Whether it's to a leader or Jess or whoever in my life.
Yeah.
And I think therapy is a good tool for that, right? Because you are just in a safe place where you can kind of just say what you feel and say what you're going through and share about your experiences, and then obviously they help you to kind of put those pieces together and kind of understand your emotions and the things that you've been through. And so yeah, so that's been helpful for me. And so yeah, it's been
Yeah.
good.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like pry, but
No, you're good.
like I as this podcast is mainly the audience is mainly Korean Americans, Asian Americans. Like there's a big stigma around therapy for like our culture, right? And I'm a big advocate for therapy. I've had many people on who spoke wonders about like how therapy really changed their lives. I'm actually considering therapy myself as well. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there for anyone listening who is struggling through anything kind of mentally, internally. Yeah, therapy is.
Yeah.
I have not met a single person who's regretted going to therapy yet. So
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for sharing that.
And honestly, for me, yeah, of course. Honestly, for me, just the last part about therapy, I think all the credit goes to my wife, Jess, because she's the one that kind of helped me, push me towards that, kind of encouraged me to do that, because she knows, like I said, I'm an external processor, and I kind of need that safe space for me to just kind of say what I want to say, and not feel judged or not feel a certain type of way because of it. And it's so, like, if you think about therapy, it's so interesting, right? You're literally talking to a stranger. I mean, unless you're kind of linked up with somebody that you already know who is a therapist, then that's different. But I would argue a lot of probably people that we know, their therapist, somebody that they didn't have a prior relationship with, right? But when you think about it from like an outside perspective, it's such a crazy thing. Like, you're literally just essentially opening up your life to a stranger, right? A professional who's kind of licensed to do that. And so, at first, it was a little weird and just a little like awkward, I'm sure, at first for a lot of people. But I think, once you kind of do it, it's just one of those things where you have to, at least try, at least experience it, right? And like you said, you've never talked to somebody who was like avidly against it after they experienced it. And maybe it's not for everybody. I don't know. You know, I can't speak for everybody, but I think it's one of those things where you really don't know until you try. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, all credit to my wife for, you know, obviously, you know, she's had her journey, and I got to witness kind of her growth through therapy. And I
Mm.
think that's what ultimately pushed me to kind of do it myself, because I saw the fruits of it. I saw the positive kind of results that came from it. And I was like, oh man, that would be good for me to try too. And so that
Yeah.
was kind of the reason that got me started. So
Oh, dang, that's
yeah.
awesome.
Mhm.
So yeah, just kind of going back to your life story. Um, let's go to, you know, you're struggling with all of this kind of throughout high school, but let's go to like college and how from college and like graduation, like how you got to the point of, man, I feel like God's calling me to become a pastor.
Yeah. So a story of how I got into ministry essentially.
Yeah,
Um, so it's a pretty long story, but I'll do my best to kind of, you know, keep it very simple. So
you can
long
make
story
it as
short,
long as you want.
gotcha. Yeah, so I went to Georgia State University in Atlanta. Graduated 2009, and then pretty much I was in college for about 2 3 years, and I was studying psychology because I was interested in doing like like kind of like therapy. Like I wanted to be a counselor or like a therapist essentially. That was kind of one of my goals.
Mm.
And a little sidebar, that's still a possibility. Like I'm still open to that, like that I'll go back to school and kind of get a accounting degree, because
Mm.
I'm really passionate about that. And I would love to, you know, kind of be that safe space for other people,
Mm.
which is cool, because as a pastor, you're not really a counselor, but you know, there's situations where you are kind of forced to be one, and you know,
Right.
you provide a safe space. For me, obviously, it's for students, middle school, high school students, because I'm a youth pastor. And so, but anyways, so yeah, I was studying psychology in college, and even though that was kind of my plan, I still felt unsure about it. Like it wasn't this like convicting thing of like, oh man, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life, right? And
Mm.
so, pretty much when I was like 2021, you know how, you know, 21 is a big age. It's like, you know, I guess the age where you can drink and stuff, but it's more
Yeah.
so like an age where you like really like kind of in the world, and you're really kind of like, you know, figuring out what you want to do with your life. And I would say, I don't want to like make it too dramatic, but around that time, I was really kind of lost in my life,
Mm.
both spiritually, personally, kind of like career wise, school wise. I was just kind of going through the motions, right? And I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. Like it really came to that point where I was like, man, like I really am struggling with this, and like I don't know if I should finish college right now, because like I can go ahead and graduate, but if I don't like necessarily have a plan, I don't really like see the point, right?
Mm.
And so during that time, a lot of my friends were doing this missions program called YWAM. I'm sure you've heard of it, right?
Mhm.
It stands for Youth with a Mission. It's one of the biggest like nonprofit missions organizations in the world. And a lot of my friends were going to this program called DTS, which is Discipleship Training School. And essentially, the school is a 6 month program. You travel to one of their bases, which is like there's hundreds of bases all around the world, and you kind of go through like Bible training, you go through like missions training, which is kind of a time for like reflection, self growth. So it's like a really good like time where you just kind of get away from your normal life and kind of just, you know, learn more about God, about yourself. And then the second half of the program, which is about 2.5 months, you're actually sent out to the mission field to do missions. So for my team and I, we ended up going to India. And so yeah, in uh, end of 2012, I made a decision to take a break from college and do this YWAM program. And then I ended up going in early 2013, and then I ended up coming home end of 2013. And so that was when I was like 22 years old.
Mm.
And so those 6 months was definitely the kind of the changing point in my life, because I had so much time to reflect. I really grew as a person, as a man. I really kind of reflamed um, my faith in God. And so So yeah, that was just a really pivotal time.
Hmm.
And it was during this 6 months that I really felt convicted and called to go into the local church. It didn't necessarily mean that I had to be a pastor, but I always knew that I wanted to invest into the youth, because for me, one of the reasons was because when I was in youth group, granted, I had my brother, I had other, strong male role models in my life, but I just remember like in the church, and I want to say this carefully because I don't want to like, you know, put a negative tone to it. But
Yeah.
for me personally, I didn't have like strong.
Mhm.
And so,
When I got older into college, like you said, like I was a Bible study teacher and stuff. Like at
Yeah.
SKBC, we were
Yeah.
we were teachers together, and that was always just a passion of mine, right? And I've always loved church. I always loved giving back. I love like younger kids, just kind of investing into their lives, and so that was always kind of like on the back of my mind. But I never thought that that would translate into being like an actual like paid on staff at a church, like being a pastor. But it's funny. So literally the first week that I was at my program, the first month I was in Hawaii, which was awesome, right?
Yeah.
who doesn't want to be in Hawaii and learn about God and worship and read the Bible and go to the beach every day, right? And so I was already in like La La Land and just enjoying myself. But the first week I met all the guys that were like part of my training school,
Mhm.
and I just like clicked with them right off the bat. Like they became brothers like literally like instantly. But what's really funny is that I had gotten there first, right? And one of my buddies, his name is Isaac. He's actually lives in North Carolina. But literally the minute he walked into the room, and let me remind you, this is the first time I've ever met this guy. Like I never knew him before, right?
Mm.
He walks in, and I'm in mid conversation with another one of the guys, and he stops me in my conversation. And he goes, "Hyung," because he's younger than me, right? Hyung's
Yeah.
like older brother. He's
Uh-huh.
like, "Hyung," and I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Bro, you sound and look and act like you're gonna be a youth pastor one day." And I was just like, "Wait, what? Like, how do you like? How does that statement even come out of your mouth?" Like, it was just the most odd way to get to know somebody, right? Like, imagine if some stranger came to you and just was like, "Hey, this is what you're gonna do with your life." You're just like, "Dude, you're crazy. Like, I don't even know you, bro."
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, like I know, I mean, to this day, I don't know if he was joking or if he just felt like saying that or he thought it was funny or whatever. But that moment always stuck out to me.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that was like the reason I became a pastor, but I
Mm.
was like, I mean, that's just kind of crazy. Like, I, I, I mean, I don't know. Was it God speaking through my friend, or was it just my friend being a fool? I don't know. But it obviously did something in my heart that it made some sort of impact on the decisions that I made, like in the coming years. And then so after that, like I went through the program, and then like I said, on the last 2 months of our program, we were in India. And while we were in India, we were doing like local missions and like, kind of reaching out to the local people and stuff like that. But there was a lot of time, like a lot of free time that we had in between kind of things that we had to do.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the best times of my life, not because I was in India, not because I was doing missions, but because I had all this time that I was like literally focusing on my relationship, with God. Like I was really like praying a lot. I was reading the Bible like all day, every day, which is something that I wasn't really doing before I got there, right? I was just busy with life, and I never really invested into my relationship with God. And so while I was in India, I had almost too much time to pray and reflect about what I wanted to do, right? Because like, remember, one of the main reasons that I went was selfishly because I had no direction in my life, and I wanted to come back from this program at least with some sort of direction. And I was really praying to God to just, just give me the next step. I'm not asking you to give me everything. Just give me the next step. Like, what is it that you have for my life? What is it that you created me for? Like in terms of like, I guess like jobs and like career or whatever. And every time I had a conversation with God, like church was always something that just kind of popped up in my head. It was never this crazy biblical moment where like, I heard like the voice of God like audibly or something like crazy, like this overly spiritual thing. It was just like it was just like a simple like, being a leader or being a pastor or being in the church, right? And for me, overseas missions was a really difficult experience for me. And like, a lot of missionaries will tell you that they feel called to like, go to Africa or go to Europe or Asia and be like a full-time missionary. And I knew through that experience that that was not something that that I felt like I was supposed to do, And so yeah, long story kind of short, that was kind of the beginning of how I felt that, going into the local church and being a leader in the church was something that I wanted to do. And I felt like a really peace at it or a lot of peace about it. And so yeah, when I came back, I obviously finished at Georgia State about another year and a half. And then after I graduated, I took a little bit of a break, about a year and a half. I was just working, helping my parents out. And then in 2016 was when I started seminary to get my Master's of Divinity, which, pretty much every pastor gets if they want to, I guess, like have the credentials of a pastor. You go to seminary and get your MDiv. And so, yeah, 2016, I started at Columbia Theological Seminary over in Decatur, Georgia. Graduated in about 3.5 years, and I finished last year, actually. Yeah, December of 2019 was when I graduated. So it hasn't even been that long, but it feels like I've been out of seminary for a very long time. But yeah, that's kind of the, I guess, genesis of my journey of becoming a pastor, which is something that I and my family and my friends, and like you were saying, I definitely thought I was the last person that would kind of fit this role. And but I guess God had a plan, and I'm just trying to be as faithful as I can to it. And but at the same time, I don't like to like box myself in. Like, I feel like when people say like you're gonna have this job or career, like they expect you to do it for your whole life. And maybe I will. Like, I'm not saying that I won't, but I'm not saying that I will either. I'm really just trying to take it like year by year and really just be faithful to what I believe God wants me to do. And if that's, being a youth pastor for like 40, 50 years, then, by his grace, I'll do it. But if not, I'll try my best to be open and flexible to, whatever seasons lie ahead. So that's kind of how it started.
Would you say that your brother had any influence in your decision to, well, I guess it's not really just a straight up decision on your part, right? Because there's an actual calling from God, right? But would you say that in whatever small fashion that your brother, being a pastor, influenced you?
So if anything, knowing that my brother was already a pastor when I was kind of going through the season that I just shared about, that actually made me not want to do it more. Not because of him, but because I was like, I never imagined both him and I essentially having a similar job, like in the same field, which is, ministry, the church. And, I had, like, honestly, I had to have really tough conversations with my mom about it, because not to say that she was like against me being a pastor, but I just think that because my brother was already in that field, and, just to be completely blunt, it's not the easiest field to be in. Ministry is very difficult, and a lot of sacrifices have to be made, and you don't really ever get credit for what you do. You just be faithful as best as you can. And I think my mom, being kind of the protective mom that she is, she didn't, I guess, want me to go through that. And I never asked her why, but I would assume it's because, my brother was already doing that for a few years by the time that I was kind of making that decision for myself. But as far as my brother, he's always going to support what I do. Obviously, as long as it's not like something stupid or like illegal or whatever, like as long as it's like reasonable job, like I would never assume my brother would be like, Abe, I don't think you should do that, unless he really felt like it was the wrong direction. So I don't vividly remember like the conversation I had with him, I don't even think it was more me asking him or like confiding in him. I think it was more me just letting him know that that was the decision I was making. I think he kind of respected it like man to man, because at that point, you know, I was a little bit older, and I think it was less of like older brother telling me what to do. You know, it was more of, hey, like if that's what you feel called to do and that's what you want to do, like obviously, we're gonna support you the best we can. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was interesting because he was a pastor first. Obviously, he's older. That probably was a hurdle that I had to get over initially. I was like, oh man, like my parents are gonna have like, two, like both their sons, their only two kids in the same field. Like that's gonna be interesting, right? And so that was tough in the beginning, but I got over it, and it kind of was what it was at that point.
Yeah. Okay, that was going to be my next question, like your parents'
Mhm.
reaction to that. So that's interesting, and because I can understand your mom's perspective too, right? Because
Sure.
I mean, let's take a moment to appreciate pastors right now, because pastors have such a difficult job, right? Because
Yeah.
you think on paper their job description is just give a sermon every Sunday, but it goes so
Mhm.
beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, you have to be a counselor at times. You have to, yeah. I mean, you're juggling so many things. You have to work all the logistics like within the church. Sometimes you're like doing budgeting stuff. Like you have to wear so
Yeah.
many hats. And let's be honest, the payoff isn't that great. It's not the most
Yep.
lucrative career, right?
No,
Um,
it's not. Yeah.
yeah, but so yeah, you have to be a special type of person to, really, yeah, be willing to give of yourself so much
Yeah.
for others. So thank you, Abe,
Yeah.
for that, and for all the pastors out there. Shout outs to you guys too, because yeah, you guys definitely don't get enough credit for everything you guys do.
Yeah.
So
And I'm only like 2.5, 3 years in, right? Like imagine my brother who's been doing this for like a decade, like a lot of my leaders and mentors, they've been doing this for 20, 25 years, right? And I'm over here already complaining after 3 years. If you listen to this podcast, I'm very young in this game. I'm just getting started. I'm only a third year. So, you know, it'll be fun and interesting to see how things unfold in the next decade or so. So
yeah.
let's see.
So,
Yeah.
and I wanted to ask you, because the church that you're in is kind of unique too, right? In the sense that
Mhm.
when you think of a Korean pastor, even if they are part of a English ministry, it's always attached to a Korean ministry church, right? So your
Yeah.
brother, for example, my pastor, he is the English ministry pastor of Sugarloaf Korean Baptist Church. So
Right.
we're kind of connected, right? We're like,
Mhm.
I guess we're sister churches, but we're very much connected, right?
Right.
And the church that you're at is actually is international, but it's a predominantly Asian American congregation
Right.
that isn't really connected to a other Asian American language speaking church. So
Right. Right.
how's that been? Because like you were saying you served at SKBC, so you know that side of it, but going to Four
Mhm.
Points, which is English speaking Asian American. Do you guys even call yourself an Asian American church?
Yeah. So it's Asian American, but the term that we use a lot is third culture. And
Mm,
what that means is like, a lot of us are Chinese American, Korean American, Filipino American, right? And
right.
so um, a lot of our generation, like, you and I, like our age, right? We identify with our Asian roots, but majority of us were born in America. And so we don't quite fit into that, like, I guess, fob Asian role, whatever you want to, label it.
Right.
But then on the flip side is like, we, we are born in America. So we're American by like the legal term. But then I guess, in a predominantly, I guess, white America, like we don't quite fit in either, right? Like,
Right.
like a lot of us were like embarrassed to like, I don't know, bring kimchi or something to school because we don't want
Yeah.
like our friends to make fun of us, right? They're like, oh, like, why are you bringing that like weird, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you never quite fit into one or the other. You're not Asian enough, but you're not American enough. So then
Right.
that's where the term third culture comes in, where you're kind of balancing those two worlds. And that's kind of the struggle that you are in. And so our church, we attract a lot of people that kind of understand that kind of push and pull between our kind of two worlds that we try to juggle. And so,
Mm.
yeah, so Asian American, third culture. A lot of our members are, American born, second gen, third gen Asian American. So it's definitely a unique position for sure. It's a unique church, definitely, especially in the context of Atlanta, because we see a lot of just Korean American or like Chinese American. It's like very much not divided, but very different.
Yeah.
So kind of putting all those worlds together has been definitely interesting for me the last few years.
Yeah, because when I think about the youth group students that I've taught in the past, the one common trait is that they have a lot of their struggles center around the fact that their parents' culture and the culture that they're growing up in are kind of at odds, right? And they're being pulled from each direction. And
Right.
for me, like I had a lot of not issues, but I growing up, it was a struggle that my parents didn't speak English, things like
Hmm.
that. So when I think of Asian American youth students, I think of those kind
Hmm.
of struggles. But like your students don't they kind of have a different type of upbringing, right? Because their parents
Oh,
are
absolutely.
fluent English
Ab-
speakers and all that. Yeah.
right. Absolutely. Yeah. So uh, I would say all of my youth parents, a majority of them, uh, were either born in America or they moved here at a very young age. So you know, they were educated in America. Like a lot of them went to great schools, like your alma mater, Georgia Tech. I
Yeah,
know a few
yeah.
parents that went there. A few of the other parents went to Ivy League schools. So
Mm,
the expectations are very high there. So yeah, language barriers is zero issue, non-issue at our church
mm,
because, like I said, my students' parents all speak English. They're all American, Western educated, and so you don't have that barrier or separation. And so and even from a church standpoint, this is obviously before COVID, but the youth students, we actually worship with the entire church, and then we have like a separate youth Bible study after service. But before youth groups, Bible study separate stuff happens, like everything is intergenerational, so worship together. I remember when I first came, like a few of the youth students were on the worship team, but they're like leading
wow.
worship for their parents and like young adults and like the entire church. And so that's obviously an advantage that we have, and we try to you know um, really cultivate that like in a healthy way of the intergenerational aspect and allowing the students and parents to worship together and have them be you know a part of the church as opposed to being always separated. So
Mm. Oh,
that's definitely cool to see.
yeah,
Yeah.
because that obviously doesn't really happen much for a congregation that has a split in the language that they speak, right? There's like for
Hmm.
me, I
Hmm.
don't think besides on special occasions like Easter and Christmas, I never really worshipped with my parents because they were in the Korean
Right.
language service and I was in the English language service. Also, oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, let's give
And if
a shot. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No,
No, you-
no. I was just gonna say, if we're being super honest, right? Like even when I was at Sugarloaf, I know that we always did the combined like KM and EM things, and it's tough, right? Because like I remember my brother would have to like do a sermon and like do Korean and English both at the same time, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh man, like this is it's tough, but obviously the efforts are appreciated, and I know that that's something ongoing, kind of in the immigrant churches, but
For
but yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I remember those flashbacks when I was with you at church. We would always have to do the Christmas performances and stuff, and then everything's in Korean and everything's in English, and then we're
Yeah.
like, it's like 8 hours long, and we're just like, yo, when are we going home, man? Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate the effort, but dude, it's like 9 o'clock at night. Like, we got school tomorrow,
Yeah.
Sunday night. So, but yeah, I just had that memory in my mind of when we were serving together. So it's
Yeah,
pretty
good
cool.
times, good times. Yeah, let's give a shout out to your church. 4 points. It's
Yes,
number 4 points with the E and with points with the E at the end. Uh,
correct. 4 points with E at the end.
you guys are in is it Sandy Springs area?
Yeah, yeah. So we're actually in Dunwoody, Georgia.
Dunwoody.
It's really, yeah, it's like at the edge of Sandy Springs, but it's right across the street from Perimeter Mall.
Mm.
And obviously right now because of COVID, everything is online live stream. And so yeah, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, 4 points, and then website is just www.4points.org. And so yeah, if you guys are ever interested, obviously 4 points is um,
Yeah.
great place if you're looking for a home church. So
Yeah. A lot of the
yeah.
kind of younger, like our age people who are looking for home churches, I actually
Mhm.
refer them to 4 points because you
Oh
guys are
wow,
doing
thank you.
a new thing there. A new in the
Sure.
sense, I think in like New York and like those other bigger cities, they have
Hmm.
these type of churches, but in Atlanta at least, there aren't many
Yeah,
Asian American churches that are pure like English speaking. So
that's so true. That's so
yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I know you mentioned your wife quite a bit, and even though I don't know her that well, I actually
Yeah.
feel like I know her because I used to listen to her on the KTL podcast a lot when she
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Hmm.
but yeah, how was that experience for you? Because I know you weren't on it, but you were always kind of in the background, right? Like you were in the
Oh,
studio.
for the podcast? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I was always just hanging out in the room. Like I didn't say anything or do anything. Maybe I think one of the episodes, like I chimed in as a joke, like one
yeah.
time, but yeah, I was just there to support and hang out and listen to kind of the stories of people and their guests. And so, yeah, I was just kind of in the background hanging out,
I,
not doing
I,
much.
I missed that podcast, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Why did they stop? Do you know why they stopped? Was it just
I actually do not. I actually do
mm,
not know. I think I'll probably say business of life. I don't know if
right?
that's a fair answer, but I'm gonna assume that's probably the reason why everyone just kind of got busy and was difficult to
Yeah,
keep up with it. I think it's I think it's hard when you have like multiple hosts, right? Because like I know
right.
for you, like it's your podcast and you host it alone, right? So like if you're not there, then it's probably not gonna happen unless you have like a special guest or something. But I think when you're trying to juggle probably multiple schedules, like if there was three different Davids and you're trying to like put it all together, I'm sure there's challenges there. So I mean, I would assume that's probably the main reason. So
Yeah, that's a good
yeah.
point because they had
Mhm.
kind of a round table of hosts, and
Right,
for me, I
right.
just record whenever I want. Like I just schedule with the guest and then we just record whenever. So it's easy
Right.
for me. But yeah, so I mean, hey,
Right.
tell your wife that I really enjoyed listening to her while she was on the
Oh yeah,
KTL
I
podcast.
definitely will.
Yeah,
I definitely will. Thanks, man.
yeah.
Yep.
So we're just around the hour mark, and I
Okay.
wanted to ask you, if there's anything you just wanted to share on that apart from what we talked about.
No, so it's actually something that we did talk about. It's kind of going back to what you were saying kind of in the beginning at the intro, I believe.
Hmm.
It was basically the part where you were kind of like, um, and don't feel bad about this because your reaction is similar to many people's reactions when they first found out that I was like, I guess gonna be a pastor and go into ministry. Like I would agree that that's probably not the first thing that most people who know me well, like yourself, would guess like kind of my journey to be. And for whatever reason, when I was first making the decision, like this, like 4 or 5 years ago, for whatever reason, I think that bothered me in the beginning
Mm,
because because honestly speaking, my personality is like for whatever reason I'm like I guess more pessimistic at times than optimistic, even though
mm,
that's a weird trait for a pastor to have, but that's just me being super honest.
yeah.
And I think when I heard people like when I when I heard the shock in people's voices, I always took it as like a negative thing, like do they think I'm not like good enough for it, or do they think that I can't do it? You know what I mean? Like it was kind of those inner thoughts that I had in my mind. But over the years, I kind of just realized that like I understand that um, I guess people have certain views and expectations of what a pastor should look like or act like or be. Um, and so in the beginning, I kind of took it as a negative thing, right? But then as I've gotten older and as I've kind of matured into my role and I've become secure in what I am and what I'm doing, and I don't necessarily, I guess, need people to like to like actively support it. I just kind of know like I've inner peace about it. I kind of flipped it into a more of a positive thing. Like, I actually don't want to be your whatever your personal definition of what a pastor should be like. I don't want to be that. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's like the inner like I don't know, just the inner person in me that just doesn't want to like fit the mold of what people want me to be. Because I think for me, I'm such a, and you probably know this, I'm such a people person, right? Like I love to, obviously socialize. I'm like the loudest guy usually at a social gathering. Like you can never miss Abe because first of all, he's like 6'4", so you can't miss him. And then secondly, he's like super loud, right? And I'm just talking all the time. And so, but yeah, I think for me, I've had to come to grips with the fact that fair or unfair, people will always have expectations of you as a pastor. And I would argue that any pastor listening to this podcast would agree, right? And I'm sure everyone has their own journey of how to kind of deal with that. Now that's not me, using that as a excuse to like, do something stupid or be like, oh, like I'm gonna go do this, but like I'm a pastor or whatever, right? That's not what I'm saying. But I just think that, yeah, fair or unfair, there is this unspoken expectation that people have of you as a pastor. And I would say that most of them are justified. Obviously, you don't want a pastor that's like out here, doing stupid things, behind closed doors or whatever like that. But and so for me, as being a young pastor, that's still a journey that I'm on. I understand, like from a biblical sense, it does say in the Bible that leaders in the church will be judged, judged harshly, or not harshly, but have higher expectations. Higher standards, and I get that. And so this is not a way for me to like just live a wild life and then turn around and be a pastor. That's not what I'm saying. But I think you can agree with me, I'm sure, that I don't necessarily fit kind of the whatever mold people want me to be as a pastor, right? And so for me, I think for me, what would make me a good pastor is that I'm authentically myself, right? If I'm not who people know Abe to be, then I'm obviously just faking it, or I'm just doing it to satisfy what people want me to be, or or want me to dress like, talk like, whatever, right? And so, yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just kind of wanted to kind of share that piece. I think one side of it is kind of me venting, but then the other side is me just being super honest about my journey. And this is something that I know that I'll be continuing to face for probably the rest of my, I guess, ministry career, if that's what you want to call it. And so but yeah, to all the pastors out there, especially the young ones like myself, I want to encourage you guys to always be yourself, because God has given each and every one of us a unique personality and gifts and things that we bring to the table. And I think, in my opinion, it would be a shame for me not to bring those gifts and talents to the table in my role as a pastor, because that's what ultimately is going to make me the pastor that I believe God wants me to be. And so, if God has given you certain gifts and strengths and things, not just as a pastor, but whoever's listening, whatever job you're in, I really hope and pray for you that we can all be authentically ourselves. And we're all going to make mistakes, whether you're a pastor or not. You're not perfect, right? We're not Jesus himself. We're all trying to be like Jesus, but many of us will fall short. And so I think it's just understanding to be gracious towards one another, especially your leaders in the church. And obviously right now with COVID and the pandemic, I think being a pastor is already hard enough, but now it's just another huge layer and hurdle that we have to get over, of trying to minister and pastor to people that we literally can't see physically, right? And so, yeah, just really praying for all the pastors out there, but also everybody, just to continue to grow into the person that that God wants you to be, and continue to do your best in whatever role you're in. So that's just kind of my last my last word, my encouragement to everybody.
Yeah, no, hey, thanks so much for that. And thanks for the honesty and the vulnerability in that, because that's so good. But just to clarify,
Mm-hmm.
what for me, when I think of you, I don't think of like you as a like a negative,
Right,
uh,
right, right.
like when I think, oh, Abe's not really pastorly, I mean more like fresh, because like
Right.
a lot of like when you think of pastor, you think of a very like just monotone kind of really slow moving, kind of boring person. But like you're
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
very fresh, you're very high energy, and I'm sure your youth group students really appreciate that. And
yeah.
I know your heart. You've been serving even before you were in like your leadership ministry pastor role or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You always had the heart to serve and all that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
hope I hope I wasn't discouraging because
No, 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 no.
yeah,
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
because I
I just wanted to bring that up though, because I know
yeah.
that it's something that I battle with internally, and I just
Mm,
think, I'm not gonna come on this podcast and just kind of like brush things off and not, be open about things like that. And so I think that's a struggle that probably a lot of young pastors like myself who
mm,
have been doing this for like less than 5 years probably still struggle. And maybe there's older pastors or even senior pastors who still struggle with this idea of kind of being what people in your life want you to be, or the way you should kind of go about your leadership role. So
mm,
I think it was more of a personal thing, but also I think an encouragement to anybody listening who is a pastor specifically, that I hope that that's not the road that we go down, because like you said, being a pastor is very difficult. And if we as pastors are in this for the long haul, we got to do it in the most healthy way possible. Because
right.
then you hear a lot of pastors who the term that we like to use a lot, they get burnt out, right? They
Mm,
get burnt out from a lot of things. And
mm,
obviously there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's not just uh, the specific topic that I'm mentioning, but I think that's more than half the battle, is that like a lot of people feel like they just can't be themselves because of,
mm,
I don't know, expectations of parents, of um, senior leadership, whatever it is, right?
yeah.
There's different issues that everyone faces. But yeah, for me, for myself, if I'm gonna, be a healthy and good pastor for a very long time, I have to, continue to be authentic, continue to be honest, and express kind of what I'm going through, because I think a lot of pastors are really hush hush about their issues, and
Right.
I never want to be that. I never want to just be like, oh, I'm fine. Oh, because I'm a pastor, I'm just gonna figure it out. I'm just gonna pray it out and I'll be fine. It's like, no,
Mm,
that's not healthy, at least in my opinion. And I
no,
think,
for sure.
yeah, I think you have to continue to have those tough conversations and continue to grow. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I want to encourage you. I don't think you becoming a pastor, just when I observe your heart, from knowing your heart, it was a surprise. And I think, yeah, your freshness and your high energy, your hype man tendencies, serve you very well, especially
Yeah.
in youth ministry, and even for
Hmm.
your peers around you. I think you bring a new level of like passion and energy to like everyone you come in contact with. So, yeah, I encourage you. I'm glad you brought it up. I encourage you to keep being you, like authentically you, because I
Yeah.
think God really, yeah, that's probably why He called you into ministry to
Yeah.
bring that freshness into
Yeah.
ministry. Yeah.
Thanks, bro. I
Well,
appreciate it, man.
yeah, man. Hey, it
Yes,
was
sir.
so nice talking to you. Thank you so much for being open, and just talking through, all the struggles like you've gone through in life. I think it's going to be really encouraging to people going through similar things. So, I thank you so much.
Mm.
And if anyone out there wants to connect with Abe or has any questions, feel free to message me at IHTHTpodcast@gmail.com, or on Instagram at I hope to hear this, or on Twitter at IHTHT podcast. Because yeah, I'll be the gatekeeper. I won't let any crazies get through. But yeah, because I'm sure, yeah, you're a good guy to know. I think in Atlanta especially,
Thanks, man. Appreciate
because
it.
like you were saying, you are a true Atlanta boy. So
Yes, true to Atlanta. Even
yeah,
though I was born in Jersey, I always love Atlanta first, just because I grew up here. So I always support Atlanta teams
you
only.
Then actually, I'm gonna ask you a question. It might be a little hurtful, but after seeing Atlanta sports teams do all the things that they've done, like
Yeah.
how do you remain a loyal Atlanta sports fan?
I honestly don't know. I think loyalty can sometimes be a blessing and a curse. I think right now it's more of the latter. It's a curse. You just keep getting your hopes up and you just keep getting disappointed more and more each time. But I always joke that it's just teaching me to be patient, teaching me to be loyal, teaching me to yeah
Perseverance.
persevere.
Yeah.
I think it's growing me as a person, man. As a pastor, as a husband now, as a
Uh,
leader. I think it's grooming me. I
mm,
just try to look at it in that way.
mm,
But all jokes aside, um, I can't wait for the day where one day, hopefully in my lifetime, we break through the curse and we win something big. I know a lot of people give me crap because they're huge soccer fans and
mm.
Atlanta United won a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I always shut that down really fast. I'm like, yeah, soccer's only been around, or at least the Atlanta team's only been around for a few years, so it
Yeah.
doesn't. To me, it doesn't count. And I know I'll get a lot of flack for that, but for me, the main sports are obviously basketball, baseball, and football.
Mm.
So until we win one of those three, I will not admit that Atlanta has a championship through MLS. Even though I kind of support United, not really. I just don't watch soccer at all,
Mm.
so I can't really say that I take credit for that or take pride in that. So
Yeah.
Braves, Falcons, and Hawks, if you guys are listening, please put this loyal fan out of his misery and win something so that everybody can be quiet about Atlanta being the most cursed sports city in the world, which I can't
Mm.
argue at this moment. But hopefully one day when that sweet moment comes, everybody will eat their words and we'll all be celebrating. So
Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to that day, whenever that day is.
Yeah.
Hopefully in my lifetime. Hopefully.
I would argue that the Braves not making it to the World Series and not winning this year was
Mhm.
better because can you imagine there being a parade for them, but like no one can go out because of the quarantine lockdowns, right? So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, that's true. And that'd be hard for me because you know me, I would be like running, running up and down the street and just like yelling and being excited, but knowing that I can't really participate would be kind of heartbreaking. So
yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Abe, thank you so much for your time today, bro. It was really nice talking to you, and yeah, I'm sure the listeners will get a lot out of this today.
Thanks, man. You too, man. I'll talk
Yeah,
to you soon. Appreciate you
yeah.
having me on.
All right. Thanks, Abe.
See you, bro. Bye.